Picking up where we left off with verse 8, we find Daniel that has made a conscious decision, it said within his heart, that he would not defile himself with this food from the king's table. And so now I want to read for you here verse 9 through 16, and then we're going to come back and pick it through. And so just want you to bear with me, but I think this is, well, I don't think this is very important. It says, starting in verse 9, it says, "Now God had brought Daniel into favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs," which is Ashpenaz. Okay? "And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord, the king, who has appointed your food and drink, for why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king." So Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who eat the portions of the king's delicacies. And as you see fit, so deal with your servants." So he consented with them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus the steward took away their portions of the delicacies and the wine that they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. All right? So here, I think there is a lot going on starting right here. It says, now, the first off, it said that Daniel had made a decision in his heart that he would not defile himself with the delicacies off the king's table. God knew that. And so what did God do? Look at verse 9. It says, now God had brought Daniel into favor and goodwill. All right, so obviously there was some trust that was being built up with Ashpenaz concerning Daniel. And so he had favor with the chief of the eunuchs. So at least by having this favor, and that favor was given because God intervened to promote his will. Daniel offers a compromise. He knows his need, but he also recognizes the position that he's putting Ashpenaz in. I think that's really important. When you see this, the way in which Daniel, spoke to him about not wanting to do this, but then he gives him reason and he gives him an out. All right? Because think about what Ashpenaz said. Look, you guys are under my direction, instruction, and the king has told me what to do. I'm kind of going against what the king's doing, so it's my head that's on the chopping block here if this don't go right. And so Daniel believed in God enough that he knew that God would protect. And not only protect him, Daniel, but also Ashpenaz for having that favor. And so he tells him, he said, look, just feed us water and vegetables for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, look at us. If we don't look better, or at least the same, then do with us what you feel like you need to do with us. But if not, let us be. And that's exactly what happened. So Daniel trusted God to provide during this time. It would have been very easy for Daniel to justify. Now think about this. I thought this was very interesting. He could have justified eating off of that table so many different ways. I was kind of thinking about being put in that predicament. And actually, whenever, Daniel spoke of this, if Ashpenaz went to the king and said, look, they have totally denied eating the food. I mean, it would have been very, easy for Nebuchadnezzar to throw him in the lion's den right then, or throw him in the furnace. But he didn't. He chose not to do that because he had found favor. But he could have been very easy for Daniel to say, "Look, I'm a kid. God's not going to hold this against me because I'm scared. I don't want to die." He could say, "Look, everybody else has done it." Matter of fact, that's one of the things we know everybody else has done, because he said, "Look, measure us against them. All right, them being other boys that had been sent from Judah. Thinking of, like I just said, man, they could kill us. If I take this to them, they're going to kill us. I don't want to die. I'm young. And so that's another one. And then here's maybe even the biggest of all. Man, this is an easy life. We're living in the palace. We're being fed. We're going to be fed the very best food, the very best drink. We're going to be getting so much more than all the other captives that are coming over. So why not? Let's live it up. But no, he didn't do that. Daniel knew that it was never right to do wrong in order to do right. I thought that was really good. Let me say that again. Daniel knew that it is never right to do wrong in order to do right. That's pretty good. All right. I think probably one of Daniel's strongest character traits was this: where God says no, Daniel said no. Where God says no, Daniel said no. And where God was silent, Daniel just, went on about himself. Here's a great quote. This comes from Dr. David Jeremiah. I assume it was from one of his books. But I just thought this was so good, and I want you to hear it. May read it several times. It says, sometimes Christians argue over things where God hasn't spoken, while allowing the things he has spoken to slip under the rug. Wow. So often we want to argue about things that don't matter, but yet the things that do matter, we want to turn a blind eye because we don't want them to apply to us. I mean, let's speak on, if we want to jump out there right now, let's think on abortion, right? A woman's right to choose. Where does that? No, not at all. There's nothing biblical about that. We're very quick to pick the sin and to turn a blind eye to a sin. So I just thought that was a great one for us to think about because there's no question that it is so true. So now let's go on down and look at 17 through 21. And it said for this, and as for these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge. Who gave them knowledge? God. God gave them favor. God gave them knowledge and skill in all the literature and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. And we know that is going to play a big role here after a while. So now at the end of the days, when the king had said that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. So we know that was 3 years, because that's how long. Then the king interviewed them, and among them none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. None. Therefore they served before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding about which the king examined them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers who were in all his realm. All right. So we look at that. We know that God gave them the ability, the knowledge, and the skill. And it was God's will to fulfill his plan using these young boys. All right. It was God's plan all along. And so because they stuck to God's law and they obeyed him, then God rewarded them with these special abilities. As it said in verse 18, end of the days meant after the 3-year period. Just think about all the stuff that they had to learn. They had to learn a new language, first of all. That was a very tough language. All right. Then all the history and the math and the science and whatever it may be that they were taught. And they were 10 times better than grown men that had been doing this for so long. So very interesting that, as they go before this king, like I said, just being young boys, that they showed these abilities. Well, they were God-given abilities, there's no question. All right? But they got there because of things and the choices that they made. All right? That they chose under some pretty tough circumstances to abide by God's rule, which was not, you would think about whenever you find yourself, in captivity, that the number one priority would be survival. All right? Survival. And their number one priority was God's will. All right? They saw that as a way in which to survive, not their own power by no stretch of the imagination. So just thought this was very interesting. And then, I think it's something I've overlooked many times when I've read this passage, that he gave them 10 times the wisdom. And we have to assume that there was some very smart men, that had that was working for Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, it was the superpower. It was the mega power of the world. And so there were some very smart people that he was comparing them to, and they were 10 times more intelligent than those people. And so as we kind of close out this first book of Daniel, I want to read verse 21. It says, "Thus Daniel continued, until the first year of King Cyrus." King Cyrus was with the Medes and the Persians, and they conquered Babylon in October of 539 BC. And so Daniel had a very long run underneath a lot of kings, and we're going to talk about them as we go through Daniel. But he was there for a very long time. He was in captivity for a very, very long time. And he served so many of these kings, in a lot of cases under very dire circumstances that we're going to be looking at. But I think that one of the big takeaways that we have to take away from this first chapter is the one thing that Daniel would not forfeit was his belief in God, and that he was not going to go against God's will no matter what the cost was. And I know we will see that play out throughout this book, but he's doing this at a young age. He's doing this under very, very trying circumstances, and he's trusting in God in everything that he does. He's not looking upon himself by no stretch of the imagination. I cannot imagine the hours that Daniel spent in prayer, searching for God's will within his life, and then trying to understand the instruction which God was giving to him. All right. So Daniel is going to be this book that we gradually open up and we unfold it, and it will be over a course of probably several months that we will do this, just because we're going to do it, like I said, in 12 to 15 minute increments. We're just not going to take it much longer than that. And so I hope you enjoyed this first chapter. Going to try to always give you just a little bit more within the history and the time and the settings and things of that nature. I just always feel like that it builds so much into the story as we're unfolding it within these great words in the Bible. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.